For thousands of years, tales of one-eyed giants called Cyclopes have haunted ancient myths, savage beings with immense strength, crafting thunderbolts for the gods themselves. But what if everything we think we know about these monsters is wrong? What if the Cyclops was never a myth at all, but a misunderstood piece of real human history? Tonight, we dig into the bones, the ruins, and the secrets left behind to uncover the shocking truth behind the Cyclops legend. The story of the Cyclops has fascinated humanity since the dawn of Greek civilization. Described as monstrous, one-eyed giants who lived in caves and built weapons for the gods, they appear in Homer's Odyssey and ancient pottery across the Mediterranean. But historians, archaeologists, and scientists now question, were these giants merely fiction? Or could these myths have been inspired by real discoveries, ancient skulls, mysterious fossils, or even lost civilizations? In this investigation, we'll explore how myth and science collide, to reveal the deeper truth behind one of history's oldest monsters. Long before the world had maps, before science explained the sky or the earth beneath our feet, stories were the only way humans made sense of the unknown. And among the earliest and most haunting of those stories was the tale of the Cyclops, the one-eyed giant, both feared and revered in equal measure. In the tapestry of Greek mythology, the Cyclops stands as one of the most powerful and mysterious figures. Not merely a monster, but a symbol of something far deeper, a blend of creation, chaos, and divine craftsmanship. The word Cyclops comes from the Greek Cyclops, which literally means circle-eyed. But what did this really mean to the ancient world? To the Greeks, it wasn't just a physical description. It was a mark of the extraordinary. A creature so different, so powerful, it could not possibly belong among mortals. The earliest stories describe not one, but three original Cyclopes, Brontes, Sterops, and Arges, the sons of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. These weren't mindless monsters roaming the wilderness. They were divine artisans, the cosmic blacksmiths who forged the most powerful weapons of the gods themselves. It was said that they crafted Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helmet of invisibility. Their skill was beyond mortal comprehension, and so even the gods respected and feared them. Imagine ancient Greeks gathered around a fire, listening to poets chant these tales, the sparks from the flames flickering like lightning, mirroring the weapons of Olympus. To them, the Cyclopes were not symbols of horror, but of creation's raw, untamed power. These beings represented the primal energy of the universe itself, before the world was ordered and shaped by reason. Their one eye, positioned in the center of the forehead, was seen not as a deformity, but as a mark of divine focus, an all-seeing vision, the embodiment of singular purpose and raw might. But myth, like humanity, evolves. As centuries passed, the Cyclops transformed from divine smiths into something darker, monstrous shepherds, savage, and lawless, dwelling in remote caves far from the light of civilization. This shift wasn't accidental. Ancient Greece itself was changing. The early poets like Hesiod spoke of an age when gods and titans shaped the cosmos. But by the time Homer composed the Odyssey, Greece had entered a new era, one of city-states, laws, and human order. The Cyclops, once the creators, became the outsiders. They represented everything uncivilized, everything untamed. In Homer's epic, the most famous Cyclops of all appears, Polyphemus. He is not a divine craftsman, but a brutal, man-eating giant who traps Odysseus and his men in his cave. Polyphemus has no respect for the gods, no sense of hospitality, two sacred pillars of Greek society. When Odysseus begs for mercy, invoking the name of Zeus, Polyphemus laughs, declaring he fears no god. To the Greeks, this was the height of barbarism. In that moment, the Cyclops becomes the embodiment of chaos, of nature unrestrained by reason or morality. But what's fascinating is how the myth reflects the shifting worldview of ancient people. As Greece's culture grew more complex, so did its understanding of what it meant to be human. The Cyclops became a moral symbol, the contrast between brute strength and intelligent order. Odysseus, small but clever, defeats the giant not through muscle, but through wit and deception. In that story, civilization triumphs over savagery, reason over raw instinct. Yet beneath the surface, there's something tragic about the Cyclops. He's powerful, solitary, and misunderstood, a relic of an older world that no longer fits into the human narrative. Some ancient scholars even suggested that the Cyclopes were symbols of forgotten tribes, people who lived outside Greek society, perhaps foreign builders or miners with strange appearances or unique skills. The idea of giants building cities was not uncommon. Many believe that the great walls of Mycenae and Tiryns were built by Cyclopes because their stones were so massive that no human could have lifted them. This is where myth and archaeology start to intertwine, blurring the lines between storytelling and history. If we look closer at the earliest depictions of Cyclopes in Greek art, carved on pottery and temple reliefs, we see something intriguing. They aren't always portrayed as monstrous. Some look almost human, bearded and strong, with a single central eye that seems to glow with wisdom rather than rage. This suggests that, at first, the Cyclops wasn't just a creature of fear, but a symbol of divine craftsmanship, a link between gods and mortals. Over time, as myths were retold and reshaped by poets and generations, the image of the Cyclops morphed from divine forger to monstrous brute, from creator to destroyer. But even in their monstrous form, the Cyclopes held an important place in Greek imagination. They represented the power of nature, vast, unpredictable, and uncontrollable. They were the mountains that could shake with thunder, the volcanoes that roared with fire. In fact, later writers connected the Cyclopes with volcanoes like Mount Etna in Sicily, believing their forges burned deep within the earth. The lightning of Zeus, the rumbling of mountains, these were the sounds of Cyclopes hammering their divine creations in the heart of the world. What's striking is how the myths survived and adapted through centuries, even as civilizations rose and fell. To the ancient Greeks, the Cyclops was both a warning and a wonder, a reminder that great power without reason leads to chaos, but also that chaos itself is where creation begins. It's the eternal paradox of mythology. Every monster hides a truth, and every legend begins with something real. The Cyclops may have started as a story told to explain the unexplainable, the sound of thunder, the discovery of strange bones, the awe of nature's power, but it became something much more profound, a reflection of humanity's struggle to define what separates us from the beasts, and what connects us to the divine. When Homer composed the Odyssey nearly 3,000 years ago, he didn't just write a story of adventure. He created a mirror for the human soul, one that reflected both its light and its darkness. And within that mirror stood one of the most haunting figures in all mythology, Polyphemus, the Cyclops of the cave. His name, meaning much spoken of, was no accident. For centuries, this one-eyed giant would become the symbol of everything wild, untamed, and terrifying about the human experience. But beneath his monstrous exterior lies a story more complex than it first appears. One that reveals not just who the Cyclops was, but what he truly represented. The encounter between Odysseus and Polyphemus is among the most unforgettable episodes in the Odyssey. It begins with a storm. Odysseus and his men, weary and lost, are driven by winds to an island shrouded in mist, an island that feels untouched by gods or men. As they explore, they find caves filled with goats and sheep, evidence of a shepherd who lives alone. But this is no ordinary shepherd. The island is home to a race of giants, enormous beings with a single eye in the center of their foreheads. Living without law, without cities, and without the guidance of the gods, they are the very opposite of civilization. Odysseus, ever the explorer, cannot resist curiosity. Against his men's warnings, he insists they visit one of these beings to see what sort of hospitality he might offer. Hospitality, or xenia, was sacred to the Greeks. To welcome a stranger was to honor Zeus himself. But Odysseus's quest for knowledge soon becomes a descent into horror. Inside the dark, echoing cave, they meet Polyphemus, a towering giant with one blazing eye and a voice like thunder. When he learns that strangers have entered his home, he doesn't greet them with food or shelter. Instead, he blocks the entrance with an enormous boulder, traps them inside, and begins to devour them, two at a time, crushing their bones as if they were nothing. To the ancient Greeks, this moment struck at the heart of their greatest fear, the collapse of order. The Cyclops was not just a monster. He was the embodiment of life without law, a creature who lived only by instinct. He did not sow, did not build, did not worship. He lived from nature alone, caring for his animals but indifferent to human morality. To Homer's audience, this wasn't just barbaric, it was unthinkable. The Cyclops was a vision of humanity stripped of its civilization, a warning of what humans could become if they abandoned reason and custom. Yet Homer's storytelling genius lies in the way he balances terror with fascination. As Odysseus watches Polyphemus, there's a strange awe in his words. The giant is powerful, self-sufficient, and free, untouched by laws or kings. In a sense, he represents what humans secretly envy, the life of pure instinct, unbound by rules. But that freedom comes at a cost: isolation. Polyphemus lives alone, without a community or companionship, talking only to his sheep. His cave, filled with milk and cheese, is both a home and a prison, a symbol of self-sufficiency turned into loneliness. Odysseus, trapped inside, must rely not on strength but on intelligence. This is where Homer weaves one of mythology's most clever twists. Odysseus tells the Cyclops his name is Nobody. Later, when he blinds Polyphemus and the other Cyclopes come running to help, knew the art of building. And so the Greeks, with their reverence for myth, asked a simple, the blinded giant screams, "Nobody is hurting me," and they turn away, thinking he's fine. It's a brilliant play on words, but also a profound message. Civilization, Homer suggests, is about cleverness, deception, and survival through wit. Where the Cyclops uses brute force, Odysseus uses language, the greatest weapon of the civilized world. The blinding of Polyphemus is more than just a victory. It's a symbolic act. Odysseus destroys the monster's single eye, the very thing that defines him. That eye, the mark of divine vision or primal focus, becomes the target of human cunning. In that moment, the ancient Greek idea of progress is born, intelligence triumphing over brute power, but the victory isn't clean. As Odysseus sails away, he cannot resist boasting, shouting his real name to the wounded giant. And in doing so, he seals his fate. Polyphemus prays to his father, the sea god Poseidon, for vengeance. The god hears his cry, setting into motion years of suffering for Odysseus. It's as if Homer is warning that arrogance, even in victory, carries a heavy price. But the story doesn't end with violence alone. There's a strange sadness in Polyphemus's final moments. Blinded and broken, he gropes at the entrance of his cave, calling to his sheep as they escape. This once mighty being, who defied the gods and devoured men, is reduced to helplessness. In that scene, Homer doesn't just show a monster defeated, he shows a creature stripped of dignity. The audience is left not only with fear, but with a glimmer of pity. And that's what makes the Cyclops myth so enduring. It touches something deeply human, the fear of being misunderstood, the tragedy of power without wisdom, the loneliness of a life without connection. To the ancient Greeks, Polyphemus's story was not merely entertainment, it was moral instruction. The Cyclops embodied what lay beyond the boundaries of the known world, not just geographically, but psychologically. He was the other, the reminder of what happens when humans abandon culture, reason, and reverence for the gods. Yet, even as Homer condemned him, he also made him memorable, even relatable. There's something almost human in Polyphemus's cries, in his confusion, in his blindness, both literal and metaphorical. The one eye he possessed could see the physical world, but was blind to wisdom, compassion, and self-control. Over time, this story would shape how generations perceived monsters, not merely as beasts to be slain, but as reflections of our own flaws. The Cyclops became the template for the monstrous outsider, the creature that terrifies because it reminds us of what we might become if stripped of morality. In the hands of Homer, the myth of the Cyclops transformed from a simple tale of survival into an exploration of what it means to be human and what we risk losing when we forget the delicate balance between strength and wisdom. Imagine walking along the rugged cliffs of a Mediterranean island thousands of years ago. The sun is fierce, the sea wind sharp, and the land still carries secrets of ages long past. You enter a cave, seeking shelter, or perhaps curiosity draws you in, and there, half buried in the soil, lies a skull unlike any you have ever seen. It's enormous, nearly twice the size of a human head, with a single, gaping hole right in the center of its face. To an ancient observer, there could be only one explanation. They were looking into the face of a giant, a Cyclops. Long before science had a name for fossils, before paleontology existed, people across the Mediterranean were stumbling upon bones and skulls left behind by creatures of the prehistoric world. To them, these were not relics of extinct animals. They were physical proof of myths come alive. And so, the legend of the Cyclops, the one-eyed giant of Greek lore, may have been born not only from imagination but from a fascinating misinterpretation of real evidence left by nature itself. Modern science tells us that the Cyclops skull was likely that of a prehistoric dwarf elephant. These ancient elephants roamed islands like Sicily, Crete, and Cyprus tens of thousands of years ago. Over time, their bones were buried and fossilized in limestone caves. When erosion or human curiosity exposed them, ancient people found themselves face to face with skulls that seemed disturbingly human yet clearly belonged to something far larger. What truly ignited their imagination, however, was a feature of the elephant's skull, a massive central cavity in the middle of the forehead. To our modern eyes, that hole is where the elephant's trunk once attached, but to the ancient Greeks, who had never seen a living elephant on their islands, it looked exactly like the empty socket of a single giant eye. The proportions were uncanny: a rounded skull, wide cheeks, and that great circular opening right in the center. Add to that enormous limb bones, thick, long, and weathered, and you had the makings of a creature that could only be described as monstrous. When these skulls were discovered near ancient settlements, they may have inspired not just fear, but awe, confirming to early societies that the earth itself had once been home to beings of immense power. Archaeological findings support this theory. In places like Sicily and Crete, where the myths of the Cyclopes were most deeply rooted, scientists have found the fossilized remains of the species Paleoxodon falconeri, the dwarf elephant. Despite its name, this creature stood about a meter tall, but its skull appeared large in comparison to its body. Over thousands of years, myth and memory transformed these small prehistoric animals into giants who could forge thunderbolts and build colossal walls. The ancient Greeks, confronted with tangible evidence that defied explanation, filled in the gaps with imagination, and in doing so, they created one of the most enduring myths in history. But there's more to this story than simple misidentification. The discovery of such fossils would have come at a time when people were already telling stories of titans, gods, and monsters. The bones seemed to validate what poets and storytellers claimed, that before humans there had been beings of enormous size and strength. To an ancient Greek mind, finding a Cyclops skull was not evidence of nature's diversity, it was proof that myth was history. The ground beneath their feet was speaking, whispering of a forgotten age when gods walked among giants. Think about how these discoveries must have felt. Imagine a farmer digging into the earth to build a home, or a shepherd uncovering strange bones after a landslide. These weren't isolated events. Fossils were everywhere in the ancient world, from Greece to Italy to Asia Minor. Every discovery added weight to the myth, turning fiction into faith. Priests, poets, and travelers carried these tales from island to island, each retelling adding new detail, new wonder. The Cyclops became not just a monster of the imagination, but a creature backed by physical proof. Even the geography matched. The islands associated with the Cyclopes, Sicily, for example, were volcanic, alive with fire and thunder. Ancient Greeks believed that the Cyclopes lived inside Mount Etna, forging Zeus's thunderbolts beneath the earth. To them, the mountain's eruptions were the sparks and roars of these giants at work. Combine that with the discovery of skulls in the caves nearby, and the story was complete, a perfect blend of myth, landscape, and misunderstood evidence. The ancient world was full of mysteries like this. Without scientific tools or fossil records, people interpreted what they found through the only lens they had: mythology. Every discovery had meaning, every strange shape a story. When bones of mammoths were found in Greece or Italy, they were believed to belong to heroes of the past. Massive tusks became the horns of dragons, petrified trees were mistaken for the remains of ancient giants, and skulls with strange cavities became proof of one-eyed monsters. The line between mythology and early science was thin, and in many ways, mythology was the ancient world's first form of science, an attempt to explain the inexplicable. As time went on, these discoveries continued to influence art and storytelling. Ancient writers like Hesiod and later philosophers speculated that the earth had indeed been populated by powerful beings before humans. They called them titans, giants, or Cyclopes, names that carried echoes of something once real, now transformed into legend. Even the architecture of ancient Greece reflected this belief. The massive stone walls of Mycenae and Tiryns were said to be Cyclopean, so vast that later generations believed only giants could have lifted the stones. In their minds, the evidence of the Cyclopes was all around, carved into the landscape, buried beneath their feet, and immortalized in their myths. The connection between the Cyclops and the dwarf elephant may seem simple today, but it reveals something profound about humanity. It shows how myth was born not merely from imagination, but from a deep, instinctive need to understand the world. The ancient Greeks were trying to make sense of their environment, using the clues left behind by nature to tell stories about their place in the universe. Every fossil, every skull, every unexplained phenomenon became a thread in the great tapestry of myth, one that still fascinates us thousands of years later. Across the ancient landscapes of Greece stand ruins so massive, so impossibly constructed that even today they defy belief. Towering walls of stone, each block weighing several tons, perfectly fitted together without mortar, forming fortresses that have endured for more than 3,000 years. They rise in places like Mycenae, Tiryns, and Argos, the heart of the Mycenaean civilization, and for centuries, they have carried a name that links myth and stone, imagination and history, the Cyclopean walls. The ancients believed these colossal structures were not built by human hands at all, but by giants, the Cyclopes, beings of unimaginable strength who shaped the stones of the earth itself. To the eyes of ancient Greeks, the walls of Mycenae were not mere constructions, they were proof of something divine. The stones were so large that even the strongest men could not have moved them. Each block was carved from limestone, roughly hewn and stacked in layers that climbed high into the sky. There was no visible binding, no trace of human struggle. They stood silent and perfect, like relics from a world that existed before mortals question, who could have built such walls if not giants? The answer seemed clear: the Cyclopes, the same beings who forged Zeus's thunderbolts and shaped the world in its earliest age. In the ancient mind, the idea of the Cyclopes as builders made sense. They were creatures of immense power, creatures who worked with the raw forces of nature, stone, metal, and fire. To associate them with these mighty walls was to weave the landscape itself into the fabric of myth. The stones were their legacy, their fingerprints left upon the earth. The very term Cyclopean masonry was born from this belief, describing not just the size of the stones, but the superhuman force required to place them. Even writers like Pausanias, centuries later, marveled at their scale, recording that the walls of Tiryns were built by the Cyclopes, with stones so large that no team of mules could move the smallest of them. But beyond myth, these structures also tell a story of a lost civilization, one whose engineering skill was far ahead of its time. The Mycenaeans, who flourished between 1600 and 1100 BCE, built their fortresses at the height of their power. Mycenae, often called the city of Agamemnon, stood as a symbol of wealth and dominance, its citadel guarded by walls that seemed to defy the limits of human capability. The stones, some weighing up to 120 tons, were not uniform or shaped by machines, yet they fit together with astonishing precision. To later generations, this precision itself became a kind of evidence, proof that something beyond mortal craftsmanship must have been at work. It's not hard to see why the myth persisted. Even today, walking among those ruins, you can feel the weight of the stones pressing down through centuries of silence. The air carries a sense of mystery, as if the earth itself remembers the giants who built it. The walls seem alive, each stone breathing a story of creation and endurance. To the ancient Greeks, these fortresses were the last remnants of a golden age, an age when gods and titans still shaped the world, when human hands were guided by divine strength. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this story lies in how mythology and archaeology intertwine. The ancients didn't invent their myths from nothing. They used the evidence around them, the ruins, the fossils, the strange remains of forgotten worlds, to explain the past in a language they understood. The Cyclopean walls stood as tangible proof that the legends of the Cyclopes were real. After all, if these beings were said to have built for Zeus and Poseidon, why couldn't they have also built for the kings of Mycenae? The idea bridged the gap between history and myth, between what was visible and what could only be imagined. Modern archaeology, of course, tells a different story. The walls were not built by giants, but by skilled Mycenaean engineers who mastered the art of using raw stone to create enduring fortifications. Their technique, called Cyclopean masonry, even today was a testament to human ingenuity. They used local limestone, shaping each piece to interlock naturally, relying on gravity and balance rather than mortar. The sheer size of the stones provided stability, while smaller rocks filled the gaps. It was an architecture born of necessity and brilliance, designed to withstand both war and time. Yet, to understand how myth transformed this reality, we must remember that the ancient Greeks lived in a world without scientific explanation. They saw power in nature, divinity in craftsmanship, and mystery in every human achievement. Even the placement of these walls added to the myth. The Mycenaean fortresses were built on hilltops, commanding the land below. From a distance, their silhouettes appeared almost supernatural, as if the mountains themselves had been shaped into fortresses by giant hands. When travelers or traders came across these ancient ruins centuries after the Mycenaeans had fallen, they saw only massive stones, silent and eternal. The civilization that built them was gone, its methods forgotten, its people vanished. What remained were walls that seemed impossible, and in impossibility, the human mind always finds magic. The connection between Cyclopes and stonework even extended beyond Greece. Ancient stories claim that these one-eyed beings traveled across lands, lending their immense strength to mortals in exchange for worship or offerings. Temples, towers, and palaces across the Aegean were said to bear their mark. In this way, the myth spread, evolving with every retelling. The Cyclops became not just a monster of the wilderness, but a builder of civilization itself, a paradox of destruction and creation, embodying both the fear of the unknown and admiration for the miraculous. When you look at the Lion Gate of Mycenae, with its two carved lions standing guard above a massive lintel stone, it's easy to understand why the myth survived so long. The lintel alone weighs over 20 tons, balanced with perfect precision. To ancient eyes, this was not architecture, it was sorcery. The Cyclopes were no longer just beasts of the caves. They were divine engineers, their hands shaping the bones of the earth, and perhaps in a way the Greeks were right. These walls were built by giants, not literal giants of flesh and bone, but giants of intellect, of imagination, of will. The Mycenaeans were dreamers and doers, people who harnessed the impossible, leaving behind work so enduring that even thousands of years later, we still stand in their shadow, wondering how they did it. And as long as those walls stand, so too will the myth of the Cyclops, not as a creature of destruction, but as a symbol of creation's greatest mystery. Every legend begins with a question, a mystery, a piece of the unknown that refuses to be silent. The myth of the Cyclops is no different. It began with whispers in the dark, with strange discoveries in the soil, and with the human instinct to explain what we do not understand. The more we look at history, the clearer it becomes that myths like the Cyclops weren't born from fantasy alone. They grew from fragments of truth, from real encounters, real fears, and real mysteries that ancient minds struggled to make sense of. The Cyclops wasn't just a monster of imagination. It was a reflection of how humans transformed the unknown into meaning. In the earliest days of civilization, the world was alive with mystery. Thunder was the anger of the gods, lightning was a weapon thrown from the heavens, and earthquakes were the earth's own heartbeat. Everything had a spirit, a reason, a purpose shaped by divine will. When people found bones too large to belong to humans, they didn't think of extinction or evolution. They thought of giants, titans and beings that once roamed the world before mankind's time. And when they found skulls with that single haunting hole at the center, they saw the face of the Cyclops staring back at them. But myth doesn't stay still. It grows, shifts, and evolves as it passes through generations. What began as a literal interpretation of a fossil became a moral story about power, chaos, and civilization. The Cyclops changed as humanity did. In Hesiod's age, they were divine craftsmen, sons of the earth who forged thunder and steel for the gods. But by Homer's time, they had become savage, lawless shepherds, a transformation that mirrored the Greeks' growing sense of order and culture. Myth became a tool not only to explain nature but to define humanity itself. The Cyclops was not just a story told for entertainment, it was a warning. A way of showing what happens when strength exists without wisdom, when power goes untempered by morality. To the Greeks, every myth carried a lesson, and the tale of the Cyclops taught that civilization was fragile, a delicate balance between reason and chaos. Odysseus, the clever hero, stood for intelligence, strategy, and human progress. Polyphemus, the Cyclops, stood for primal force, for instinct without restraint. Their encounter in the cave was more than a story of survival. It was a symbolic clash between the wild and the civilized, between nature and humanity's attempt to rise above it. Yet, even within that story lies something more subtle. The Cyclops, for all his savagery, is not evil in the traditional sense. He lives by his own code, one older than human law. He herds his animals, he lives off the land, and he fears no god because in his world there is no need for gods. He represents a version of existence ungoverned by civilization, frightening, yes, but also pure in its simplicity. The Greeks feared him not because he was monstrous, but because he reminded them of what they could become if they lost their grip on order. This is where myth becomes misunderstanding. Over time, stories that once carried deep meaning are retold, exaggerated, and reimagined. The Cyclops, who was once a symbol of primal creation, becomes a brute, a villain. The divine builders become monsters hiding in caves. Human imagination blurs truth and fiction, shaping myths to fit the fears and beliefs of each new age. What began as an attempt to explain fossils and ancient architecture became a moral reflection on human nature itself. The blending of truth and story didn't stop with the ancient Greeks. As their tales spread across the Mediterranean, other cultures adopted and reshaped them. In Roman myth, Cyclopes became the loyal servants of the god Vulcan, forging weapons beneath Mount Etna. In later European folklore, one-eyed giants appeared in new forms, lumbering beasts in forests, protectors of hidden treasures, or even fallen gods banished to the earth. Every retelling carried echoes of the original, that haunting image of a single, all-seeing eye and the power that came with it. But the real genius of myths like the Cyclops lies in how they bridge the gap between the physical world and the human psyche. They show us how our ancestors perceived their surroundings through wonder and fear. When they found something they couldn't explain, whether a fossil, a thunderstorm, or a mountain's eruption, they didn't ignore it. They told stories about it. Myth was their first science, their first philosophy, their first attempt to make sense of chaos. And because of that, it still resonates today. Even in the modern world, where we can explain the Cyclops skull with biology and geology, the myth still holds power. Why? Because it taps into something deeper than fact. It speaks to the way humans think. We don't just want to know what something is. We want to know why it exists. We seek meaning in every mystery. The Cyclops story isn't just about a one-eyed monster. It's about humanity's relationship with the unknown, about how we turn fear into story and story into belief. There's also a timeless irony here. The ancients thought they were uncovering the remains of giants, but in a way, they were uncovering their own reflection. The Cyclops, the monstrous other, represented everything humans wanted to conquer: ignorance, chaos, the wildness of nature. But the moment they created him, they also acknowledged his connection to themselves. Myths are never only about gods and monsters. They are about us, our strengths, our flaws, our longing to understand what we cannot see. As centuries passed, the Cyclops faded from religion and myth, but he never disappeared entirely. His image lived on in art, literature, and even modern fantasy. From ancient pottery to Renaissance paintings, from Homer's verses to modern novels, the Cyclops endures as a symbol of both danger and fascination. He reminds us of our shared past, a time when every strange discovery was a doorway to legend. What makes the Cyclops myth truly remarkable is how it embodies the process of human storytelling itself. It begins with an observation, a fossil, a mountain, a thunderstorm, and transforms through emotion and imagination into a narrative that carries meaning. Each generation adds its own perspective, reshaping the story to fit new realities. Myths evolve just as civilizations do, and in that evolution, truth is never lost. It's simply hidden beneath layers of wonder, waiting to be rediscovered. The Cyclops was never just a creature of fear. He was a mystery born from truth, reshaped by imagination and preserved by time. From divine craftsman to misunderstood monster, his story captures the essence of what it means to be human. To see the world not only as it is, but as it might be, and to find in every unexplainable thing a spark of meaning that connects us to our past. Imagine standing inside a vast, sunlit cave on a remote Greek island. The air is cool, the stone beneath your feet echoes with ancient silence, and suddenly your eyes catch something half buried in the rock. A massive skull, weathered by time, its jaw broad, its teeth enormous, and in the center of the forehead, a single gaping hole. What would you think if you were a shepherd or a sailor thousands of years ago, without modern science to guide you? To the ancients, this was no ordinary skull. This was proof of the Cyclops, the one-eyed giant of their myths. But what we now know through archaeology, paleontology, and anthropology has begun to uncover an extraordinary truth that the Cyclops legend might not have been born from imagination alone, but from the fascinating intersection of myth and science. In the past 2 centuries, scientists have uncovered bones and fossils across the Mediterranean that shed new light on how ancient peoples might have stumbled upon giant remains. On islands like Crete, Cyprus, Malta, and Sicily, all regions steeped in Greek mythology, paleontologists discovered fossils of prehistoric elephants, known as Paleoloxodon falconeri, that once roamed these lands. These creatures were small by elephant standards, some no taller than a cow, but their skulls were enormous in proportion to their bodies. What's most striking is that the central nasal cavity, where the trunk once connected, forms a large, round hole right in the middle of the skull. To an ancient observer who had never seen an elephant, this could easily be mistaken for the single eye socket of a massive, humanoid skull. This discovery alone could explain centuries of belief in the Cyclops. Imagine early Greeks exploring caves on Mediterranean islands and coming across these bones. They would see massive femurs, thick ribs, and gigantic skulls with one haunting hole in the center. Without the scientific knowledge of anatomy, they would do the only thing they could: create a story. They would speak of giant beings that once roamed the earth, strong enough to move mountains, fierce enough to defy the gods. In their minds, these weren't fossils of animals long extinct. They were remains of the mighty creatures their ancestors had spoken, of the Cyclopes who built walls and forged thunderbolts, and it wasn't just Greece. Similar discoveries have been made across the world. In Italy, Sicily, and even parts of Turkey, fossilized bones of ancient mammals have sparked myths of giants and monsters. In Sicily, for instance, where the myth of Polyphemus was born, large fossil deposits were found near Mount Etna, a mountain that the Greeks believed was the home of the Cyclopes, where they worked the forge of the god Hephaestus. To ancient minds, this connection made perfect sense. The thunderous sounds of volcanic eruptions, the glowing rivers of lava, and the discovery of massive bones all painted a vivid picture. Below the mountain, one-eyed giants labored in fire and smoke, forging weapons for the gods. Modern science now tells us that what ancient people were hearing was the earth itself, volcanic rumblings, magma shifts, natural explosions, but to them, it was the voice of myth. This is one of the most powerful aspects of human storytelling, the way we transform the unknown into something meaningful. When faced with something they could not explain, the ancients didn't ignore it. They gave it life. They gave it eyes. They gave it purpose. The Cyclops was born not out of fear alone, but out of a profound need to understand the mysteries of the world. But beyond fossils, modern archaeology has uncovered another fascinating clue: the architectural feats of ancient civilizations that seemed too advanced for their time. across Greece and the Mediterranean. There are walls made of stone so large that it's hard to imagine how they were moved without modern machinery. The ancient Greeks themselves called them Cyclopean walls, believing they could only have been built by giants. Sites like Mycenae and Tiryns still stand as silent witnesses to this belief, with their massive limestone blocks fitted so precisely that even a knife blade cannot slip between them. To the Greeks, no ordinary human could have built such wonders. Only the Cyclopes, the divine builders, had the strength and skill to raise those monumental walls. Today, we understand that these structures were indeed built by humans, using ingenious techniques and coordinated labor. But the myth of Cyclopean builders reveals something profound about the ancient mind. When faced with greatness beyond comprehension, people attributed to something superhuman. They looked at the ruins of ancient cities and saw the hands of giants, the legacy of gods, the memory of a lost age of power. The myth of the Cyclops became not only an explanation for strange bones, but also a tribute to the human capacity for awe. And even as centuries passed, the fascination didn't fade. In the Renaissance, scholars began to rediscover ancient texts and fossils. When travelers in the 5th, 10th, and 16th centuries came across these enormous skulls, many still believed they had found proof of giants described in the Bible or in classical myths. It wasn't until the rise of modern science in the 18th and 19th centuries that paleontologists began to piece together the truth that these giant skulls belonged not to mythic beings, but to prehistoric animals. Yet, even after this revelation, the story of the Cyclops continued to evolve. In modern culture, the Cyclops has transformed from a creature of fear into a symbol of vision, power, and even wisdom. In literature, film, and art, it often represents the duality of knowledge and blindness, of seeing too much or too little. Science fiction reimagines the Cyclops as alien beings or genetically altered humans. In some interpretations, the single eye symbolizes focus, insight, or the all-seeing nature of the universe itself. What began as a misinterpreted skull has become a timeless metaphor for how humans perceive truth. But what is most fascinating about the modern exploration of the Cyclops myth is how it connects to our ongoing quest for understanding the past. Today, scientists use advanced imaging and DNA analysis to reconstruct extinct species. They can determine the exact size, diet, and even the environment in which ancient animals lived. Every fossil that once sparked a myth now tells a different story, not of gods or monsters, but of evolution, adaptation, and survival. Yet, even with all our knowledge, the allure of the Cyclops remains. The image of the one-eyed giant still captures something primal, the sense that no matter how much we learn, there are mysteries just beyond our reach, waiting to be discovered. And perhaps that's the real power of the Cyclops legend. It reminds us that myth and science are not enemies. They are two sides of the same coin. Myth asks the questions. Science seeks the answers. The ancient Greeks saw a skull and asked, "What creature could this be?" Today we look at that same fossil and ask, "What can this tell us about the world that came before us?" The difference is in the tools, not the curiosity. That same hunger to understand, the one that led our ancestors to create gods and monsters, is the same drive that fuels discovery today. So, when we uncover the bones of a prehistoric elephant or gaze upon the towering ruins of a Cyclopean wall, we're not just studying history, we're retracing the path of human imagination, from the fires of myth to the light of science. The Cyclops may never have walked the earth as the Greeks imagined, but the story it inspired continues to live, evolving alongside our understanding of the world. Because in every myth, there's a fragment of truth, and in every truth, a whisper of myth, both reaching across time, reminding us that even our greatest legends begin with the simple, eternal act of wonder. In the end, the legend of the Cyclops stands as one of humanity's most fascinating bridges between myth and reality, a story that began with fear and wonder and evolved into a mirror of our own search for truth. What once seemed like the monstrous imagination of ancient storytellers turns out to be a reflection of how we, as humans, have always tried to explain the world around us. From the discovery of ancient elephant skulls mistaken for one-eyed giants, to the thunderous volcanoes believed to be their fiery forges, Every piece of the Cyclops myth reveals a chapter in our journey from mystery to understanding. The Cyclops reminds us that myths were never just tales. They were early science, early philosophy, early history. They carried the wisdom of a people who saw the divine in every rock, storm, and shadow. And even now, as modern science unveils the truths behind these ancient stories, the myth endures, not as superstition, but as heritage, a testament to humanity's boundless imagination and unending curiosity. The Cyclops was never just a monster. It was a question, one that echoed through generations, what lies behind the unknown. And in seeking the answer, we didn't just uncover the truth of bones and fossils. We uncovered the truth about ourselves, that we are creatures driven by wonder, shaped by stories and forever drawn to uncover the mysteries that lie between myth monster and misunderstood history.